We'll be having a discussion with Indiana State Senator Jim Toms and Indiana State Representative Holly Sullivan. That's coming up next on WNIN Lawmakers. I'm John Gibson. This is WNIN Lawmakers. Before we talk with Indiana State Senator Jim Toms and Indiana State Representative Holly Sullivan, let's get an update from Brandon Smith in Indianapolis.
Governor Holcomb wants to spend state surplus dollars to fully fund a teacher pension fund. Doing so would reduce by $70 million a year the amount districts statewide have to pay. Holcomb wants schools to use that savings to give teachers a pay raise, though his plan doesn't force them to. House lawmakers unanimously advanced a bill out of committee this week to make changes at the Indiana Department of Child Services. Some of the changes give DCS caseworkers more time to begin and end their initial assessment after a report of a child in imminent danger. And the measure eliminates poverty as a reason why a child can be removed from a home. But GOP legislators then rejected Democrats' attempt to amend the bill. State law establishes how many cases on average DCS workers should have at one time, but a state Supreme Court decision says those standards are unenforceable. Democrats' proposal would compel DCS to hire more caseworkers if the caseload limits aren't met, but Republicans contend there's already enough oversight of the agency. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
Joined by Indiana State Senator Jim Toms, whose district includes Posey County and portions of Gibson and Vanderburgh counties, and Indiana State Representative Holly Sullivan. She represents portions of Vanderburgh and Warwick counties. I'd like to thank you both for coming in today. We certainly appreciate it. Well, the session is underway. It's a two-year budget session. The session doesn't go on 2 years, but you have to write a budget for 2 years. Let's talk about some of the priorities for the budget that you'd like to see, starting with Senator Toms.
Well, I want to make sure that we are very cautious on how we start allocating the money, because I know right now we have all the agencies and organizations that depend on state funding. They're up at the State House now, and they're asking for their share.
Sure.
And so it's just, I would like to see us get some increases in pay for the teachers. I think that's very important. I just do. And I don't know whatever formula they come up with the governor's plan or however, I do hope we get immediate increases for those. I think that's a priority. Yeah.
And Representative Sullivan, as Senator Toms mentioned, the governor is looking toward giving more money to schools for teacher increases if that works for the individual school districts. Do you like the governor's idea?
Yeah, we heard a little bit more about his ideas in the State of the State. He gave us some insight on his transfer from the reserves, keeping it at a healthy 11% or above, but making a one-time payment out of those reserves of $150 million towards the Teachers Retirement Fund 96. And I think that's a really smart use of money because it has a long-term effect of benefit for our local school corporations. And like Brandon Smith said, it does give you $70 million in those local budgets to be able to be used in their educational funds, because last year we did change in the state policies that now the school corporations have an operational fund and an educational fund, and that money can go directly there. With that money, they can then choose at local levels to be able to use that to increase their teacher pay. But to take it back to maybe what a constituent would like in it, is paying on the principal of your mortgage is going to help you in the long run. And if you can put an insurgence of that money in and get the long-term effects, it changes it from about 7.2% to about 5.6% for those local corporations and frees up a lot of money.
Now, of course, Indiana's been dealing with a teacher shortage for a while. Difficult to find teachers to put in the classrooms. Do you think this kind of potential pay raise or this kind of funding would help attract more teachers to the state?
I certainly hope that locals could use it in that fashion. It's up to the local communities and
Right.
the way in which they would use that, and I fully support keeping it at a local decision. But just here at EVSC, I was looking at some numbers the other day, checking on that exact issue, and between 2011 and 2014, we hired 22.9% more teachers into that school corporation. So we're seeing a growth. Is it the right amount? I think every local corporation would have a different number to answer
Right,
that.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Department of Child Services Reform Bill. I believe that was also mentioned by Brandon moments ago. That's House Bill 1006. It allows a longer time for caseworkers to do assessments. It raises the foster care age to 21 and eliminates poverty as a reason to remove a child from a home. Now, when it reached the floor, Representative Hatfield of Evansville proposed an amendment requiring additional caseworkers be hired if caseload standards weren't met. As I understand it, Representative Sullivan, you voted against that amendment. How do you feel about the bill in general, and why did you reject that amendment?
Well, for House Bill 1006, I think it's very important for constituents to understand the process in which that was created. When we heard and saw some of the data coming out of DCS, but bipartisan acknowledgement that there were problems.
Right, right.
And the governor and the executive branch did hire an outside consultant, experts, to kind of look at our system and compare it to where we were nationally. And throughout the entire summer, an interim study committee studied those findings from the expert, and those findings and recommendations are in House Bill 1006.
Right.
So I feel very confident in the recommendations in House Bill 1006. I feel very confident in the numbers that are currently in code for the number of case management workers, and I feel confident that we're making some changes internally to make those reports even better. So although Representative Hatfield's amendment was, well, he has the right intentions for our children, those things are already being put in place and already in our policies as they are now, so there wasn't a need to add them to House Bill 1006.
As you see it. Okay. Well, Senator Tom's over on the Senate side of things. What is in the works over there in terms of dealing with the issues in the Department of Child Services?
Well, there's a lot of discussion. I know that they had that audit last year with DCS, and a lot of talk is about money, the money factor, and how much we're going to pump into that agency. But I firmly believe that money's not going to fix what they got wrong over there. I think Terry Stigdon, the director, is doing a great job. She's genuine in her attempt to make this a better agency. But they have problems within that agency, and it's not the caseworkers, but I think within the center of that agency, there may be people that's been there so long that are no longer effective. And I say that because of the experience I've had working for people that's called my office, called me at home about an issue they've got, whether it's foster parents or a family that's got a trouble with the agency responding to them, getting a phone call answered. And I've called on their behalf. And it got to the point where I started documenting the calls into the agency, requesting them to return my call with no calls coming back. So I think besides money, it's going to take more than that. It's going to take a really serious review of personnel, especially the personnel between Terry Stigdon and those caseworkers.
So
and that's local too, by the way.
Right, right. So you think some people need to be let go? You think?
I absolutely do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
And in terms of investing any more funding, you're trying to avoid that as well?
Well, if it would take funding, but to just pour money into it and think that's going to fix it won't do it, and that's not the answer. And until it's repaired, where it's functioning properly, where it's effective, why would you spend more money for to have the same thing happen that you have now? You're no further along. So, and like I say, from personal experience, I know what happened in 2017 in September when I started getting calls from families for help, and I made countless phone calls to these agencies within the department to key people. I couldn't get an answer. They wouldn't return a call for a state senator. Heaven help our citizen out here that's needed help.
All right, well, let's move on to something else. It's a bill that passed out of Senate committee this week, Senate Bill 279. It allows for younger defendants of murder or attempted murder to be tried as adults, as young as 12. Senator Toms, are you in favor of that kind of measure?
Well, I'm not on the corrections committee where that bill went through anymore, but you know, we're in strange times now. Things are much different. We've evolved to a level now that perhaps this is something that is going to have to be a procedure that we do now, because we see the news accounts where we have people that age committing horrendous crimes, and in some cases they need to be adjudicated at the adult level because of the seriousness of the crime. I know it's contentious, and I heard discussion on the Senate floor this week about it. Some who are opposed to it. It's a hard call to make, but you got to ask, well, what's a better solution? What other answers would you have?
Well, I think folks would argue that 12, 13-year-olds are still obviously young enough to be rehabilitated and educated. Do you feel this is sort of giving up on some of these kids?
Well, I don't think that's the case, John, but I think what they were doing is looking at the particular crime, the level of the crime, the outrageousness of the crime. We're not talking about someone who'd done shoplifting or even burglarized a home. We're talking about somebody who had done a mass shooting or attempted a mass shooting. And that puts things in a different perspective, something that we haven't dealt with in our society decades ago, but it's evolving in that direction. And at some point, you're going to have to readjust your criminal codes. I think that's where we're at.
All right. Well, I know that this was over in the Senate. I'm not quite sure what's happening in the House on this, Representative Sullivan, but what are your thoughts on changing the code, as Senator Thomas was saying there, to possibly allowing kids as young as 12 to be charged as adults?
I'm going to be honest, I haven't followed the Senate bill. We are only in the second week of ensuring the integrity of our institution by making sure the committees are the workhorse of the. I've focused my energies right now on roads and transportation and ways and means, and don't really have opinion on those things coming out of the committees over in the Senate right now. Sorry.
Okay. Well, we'll bring it up as it moves along. One thing that Governor Holcomb called for in his State of the State address is that he would like to see a hate crimes bill passed this year. Indiana has made national headlines over the last few years because we're one of a handful of states that doesn't have one. We'll start with you, Representative Sullivan. What do you think? Is it time for Indiana to have a hate crimes law?
I think we're having that discussion at the state level now, and I think it's going to be a healthy discussion. In the House of Representatives, we have three options right now. We have keep the Indiana code as is. Many feel we are allowing for the judges and prosecutors to be able to do that now. Then we have a second option. We have a bill that was written by Representative Tony Cook. That is a bias crimes bill with a list of those that are protected within that. And then we have another bill, which is Representative Sturwalt's bill, which more or less is a bias crimes bill, but encompasses every Hoosier within that. Do I have an opinion of that? My opinion right now is that I'm taking in information from my constituents. I think that's extremely important that we engage with our communities now. It's very different outside the bubble of 465 around Indianapolis on what the feelings are of those three different options that we have in the House. I've had some constituents call. I've got about 300 surveys in. I don't think that's a good enough data sampling of what Hoosiers want in Southwest Indiana. And some of the bigger corporations have put their voice in that they want this for future hiring. And those corporations here locally have said they don't. So we have a very diverse input of industry, constituents, prosecutors, and attorneys now. So it's going to be a discussion that we're going to have, and we're going to have to really rely on our constituents to reach out and let the representatives and senators know.
Well, Senator Toms, when Governor Holcomb mentioned in his address that he'd like to see a hate crimes bill. Some members in the legislature stood up and applauded, and some didn't. Were you among those who didn't, or how do you feel about the hate crimes bill?
If you review the tape, I was one of them that did not stand. Mm-hmm. And I have not had anyone who's come to me asking for it, but I've had a lot of people who's volunteered to come to me to tell me they don't want it. But I do want everybody to understand that there's a lot of discussion. I hear a lot of comments being made. And we need to really look at some of the things that are factual. One is, in 2003, our Supreme Court ruled that Indiana had sufficient laws for biased crime to allow the judge to use an enhancement sentencing on a biased crime. Mm-hmm. We have that. And also, it's been very interesting in these bills that they're offering up. I didn't know there's three. I knew there was at least two in the House, and there's one on the Senate side.
Right.
And it's curious to me what is the mindset behind all of this hate crime legislation, because currently we have like 7 protected classes in our statute. The new versions that I've seen, the Senate, I believe, has got 14 protected classes. And interesting enough, they took the word creed out of our original. Was important. The word creed was removed. And the word creed is a very important matter, because the definition of that word is it is a system of beliefs, opinions, and principles. It's what your faith is based on, not your religion. I've had some senators say, well, we got religion in there. Well, that's insignificant, whether you're whatever denomination you belong to.
No.
But what is important is the creed, what you use for your values, what determines right and wrong for you. And why that was taken out is a flag up for me. And again, we're talking about 14 categories. We got 6.5 million people that live in this state. Mm-hmm. And you cannot squeeze 6.5 million people in this 14 category list without leaving some people out.
If creed was put back into that bill, could you support it?
Well, one of them offered me, well, I'll put it back in. Well, not just on my behalf, but I'm wondering, what is the drive that you're willing to take it out? What's the rush here to get this done when we currently have what the Supreme Court ruled is sufficient? And there's a report that I have that was conducted by the NAACP. I don't remember what year this was released. It's apparently pretty recent. It came out of Washington, where they listed all the states. And there's only 2 locations in the country, according to that report, that has laws like what they're wanting here in Indiana, and that's California and the District of Columbia. 2 locations. They say we're one of 5, but we're one of 48. There's only 2 that have laws like what is being pushed here. I'm just saying that I think we better slow down a little bit and think about what we're doing. What will be the repercussions? If we do it wrong, it's probably going to be wrong forever, because it's very difficult to repeal something where there was a mistake made. And again, the people that has been contacting me is opposed to this, and so I have to consider their thoughts on this too. So I just want to share that with everyone.
All right, well, let's move on to economics here a little bit. There are a couple of bills on the Senate side, Senator Toms, that would pave the way for a casino in Terre Haute. Now, do you feel a casino 2 hours up Highway 41 could have an adverse effect on the Tropicana operation here in Evansville? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know whether it would impact us that significantly. I really don't. But I do know that that's a competitive industry now, and they're relocating, I think, from Gary down to new locations. It's just a very competitive industry, and I don't know where the next one will crop up at. We also have border states too that have opened up casinos, and it's just that's everybody's after that revenue. And but I don't see how that would really have a major impact. I don't think it would be something that would register on the screen as far as our casinos here.
So you wouldn't mind?
I haven't heard from here, so no one said anything to me.
Yeah. Okay, Representative Holly Sullivan, what are your feelings on that possible casino in Terre Haute?
Well, the gaming laws in Indiana are very complicated, and the bill that used to be Representative Messmer, but now Senator
Right.
Messmer is carrying on gaming is very comprehensive. And the potential of a casino in Terre Haute absolutely would affect Evansville as well as French Lick. And there's a lot of discussion about, well, there's going to be another casino right across the border in Illinois, but there's a lot of casino and gaming
Right.
facilities and totally different network over in Illinois. So I don't know if that's as big of a risk or worry, I should say,
Yeah.
as we think now with those numbers. It's very unpredictable. But I do believe it could be a hindrance to those that come to Evansville. And for that beautiful investment that's now in downtown Evansville, we need to be aware of any of those other licenses that move closer to Evansville.
Right,
What could
right.
hinder some of the gambling there.
All right. Well, as we all know, in Washington, D.C., there's a partial federal government shutdown. Is it affecting Indiana state business? If not now, will it at some point? Well, we'll start with you, Representative Sullivan.
I think this is something that Hoosiers can be really proud of. A statistic that I heard the other day, that we are the 47th least affected state by this federal shutdown. 47 out of 50 is actually a ranking that sounds good right now as far as other states and their effect of the federal shutdown. Another number that I read the other day was that the American Economic Council said that the GDP change of output throughout this shutdown was at 0.01% every 2 weeks. So it's affecting, yes. Is it a major effect to the state of Indiana? Not like other states. I think that has the executive decisions that have been made with over the last 8 years are to be applauded for that. Some Hoosiers, yes, are feeling that effect, but definitely not as much as the other states. So I think it also goes back to how we honestly balance our budget for several budget sessions now.
Senator Toms, are you concerned about the impact of the federal government shutdown on Indiana? Do you think there's an effect out there?
Well, for the federal employees, there is right now because
Sure.
their pay has been cut off. But I think in a large scheme right now, as Representative Sullivan pointed out, we're in a really good position here in Indiana. And of course, as time goes on and this it becomes very stagnant, it will have an impact. But at this point right now, we're in good position. We're still able to go ahead and continue working on our budget and predict our finances pretty well.
All right. Well, we have just a few moments left here. Let's talk a little bit about bills that each of you are sponsoring and that you hope to see passed this year. I guess we'll start with Senator Toms. Do you have a bill or two that you have sponsored that you're passionate about?
Well, I did get one passed this week out of committee to raise the per diem for the volunteer firefighters. These guys get $200 a year for equipment for the vehicle and clothing. It would bump it up to $400. Not a significant fund for the increase, but it would help because there's such a shortage of volunteer firefighters.
Right.
I also filed a bill to up the per diem for the sheriffs from the $35, which has been there for a long time, to $55. I think it's a fair and reasonable request. I do have
and a per diem like that would cover
for the level 6 felons that these guys are paying out of their pocket, and these county jails, for the most part, not all of them, but a great portion of them, are way overcrowded right now.
Right, sure.
And so that would help these guys here. So I've got that. And I also have a bill trying to establish a veteran cemetery here in Evansville. I think that's important. And I'm now the chairman of the Veterans Committee. And so we have some veterans bills that I think is very important. I hope we can get some of these passed as well.
All right, Representative Holly Sullivan, what are some of the bills you've authored and that you hope to see passed this session?
Thank you for asking. House Bill 1002 just Wednesday was heard in Ways and Means, and it's a workforce development bill, something I'm very passionate about, making sure that we can continue to blur the lines between K through 12, higher ed, and careers, so that our next generation of Hoosiers have a very strong path forward to the job and the careers in which they want. And so this bill has a lot to do with career and technical education, as well as allowing and encouraging employers to plug into that workforce pipeline earlier within the student's career.
All right, we have just a moment left. Let's talk a little bit about Vanderburgh County, as I understand it, all of the senators and representatives from the Evansville area are once again trying to add a magistrate to the Vanderburgh Circuit Court. Why do we need an additional magistrate, and does it look like we'll get it this year?
Well, I guess that would be up to Representative McNamara and Representative Sturwald to hear the bill. But yes, we have been asking that, and it's simply about caseload.
So the caseload's too heavy for what we have at this point?
I'm not an expert in this field, but there are different studies that have been done in different interim study committees, and that's what those numbers show. Yeah,
and of course we've talked about the crowding at the jail. Senator Toms, why do you feel we need another magistrate here?
Well, for the same reason Senator Becker's got that bill. I'm on that bill with her, so it would help share the workload a little bit here in Vanderburgh County. So.
All right. Well, we certainly appreciate both of you joining us today. We've been talking with Senator Jim Toms and also State Representative Holly Sullivan, and we hope you will join us again next week on Lawmakers. Our scheduled guests are Indiana State Senator Vanita Becker, who we just mentioned, and Indiana State Representative Wendy McNamara, who we also just mentioned. Nice segue there. We appreciate that. I'm John Gibson. Thanks for watching WNIN Lawmakers.